So again, I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's episode, Whitman, Alabama, A Portrait of America. Again, I'm joined by Jennifer Crandall, who's an artist, a filmmaker, and a journalist all at once. I also want to welcome Camille Bernstein, who is an English teacher at Natick High School in Natick, Massachusetts. Camille will be in the chat box. She'll be sharing resources that she's pulled together, maybe asking some questions and responding to thoughts that you might have. Please do, and I encourage you to have conversations with Camille in that chat box. So, Jen, I know you're with me. I think, in fact, you're up in Massachusetts as well. Can you hear me? Hey,
I'm in Cape Cod. Yes, can you hear me? Good.
Great. I can. Thank you so much for joining. And you know, we've got what I suspect is a tired and exhausted and very eager audience tonight of colleagues and educators who are anxious to learn more about your project. If you'll indulge me, I actually would like to start tonight's session by sharing just a little bit more about the center and then ask you to respond to a question.
Yeah.
5 years ago, when our current president of the center, Robert Newman, who actually is a English professor himself, took over the center, he gave an inauguration speech in which he coined the phrase, I think he did it sort of off the cuff, humanities moments, lowercase h, lowercase m. And he referenced these as moments in our lives when we have these kind of first person epiphanies, when something in the humanities just sticks with us. I mean, it just clarifies, it provides context, it reminds us we're not alone. Whatever those emotions are, whether they're tragic or beautiful or aesthetic or nostalgia, whatever it is, that there's something about a song or a verse or a movie or even a landscape that just speaks to you, and you carry it forever. It's just with you always. And it's interesting, when I asked the opening question tonight, how many of our audience members immediately came up with a writer, an artist, a poet, a poem. And in fact, many of them were quoting these things, right? They're on their walls, and in fact, I even think I saw two of our participants, Michelle and Peter, who both gave the same poet, and they realized they're not alone in this love of this particular writer. Here's my question for you.
Yeah. I
wonder what your humanities moment is. Just you personally, right? Just what has stuck with you your whole life? It may not have nothing to do with Whitman, Alabama, what we're doing tonight, but just you as a person. What is there anything that it just immediately comes to mind as that piece of the humanities that has informed who you are?
Absolutely. And actually, that's what I'm going to be talking about for the first 15 minutes of tonight.
Fantastic.
So maybe we should just jump right into it.
We can definitely do that.
Great segue. Yeah.
Well, more than a segue, I would encourage you, when you have some time, and I would encourage our entire audience to go to this website, humanitiesandmoments.org. It's now a digital project that we host at the center. And we ask everybody to submit moments, and then we curate them and find connections. And so if you want, Jen, please do submit this. And I invite everyone in the audience to go and submit their own moment. And I will tell you that my moment, one of the moments I added, was Whitman, Alabama, because it stuck with me. It was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and it was right after S-Town, the podcast, had come out. And I just had this image of what Alabama was as I drove from Birmingham to Tuscaloosa, and somebody down there told me about this, and it really blew my mind. And in fact, Camille, who was a teacher advisory council member from last year, I shared it with her, and she started crying too. Every time I watch these, I cry. Thanks a lot, Jen.
Wow.
You make me cry on a regular basis. Thank you for sharing this.
No, I'm really happy to be here, Andy. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to National Humanities Center, Libby and Camille for tonight, helping to organize it, and all of you out there that I can't see for taking time out of your day to join us tonight. So I'm really looking forward to some good conversation, and we can get started whenever you want. If you want me to get started, and we'll roll right into my humanities moment.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I think to start off, let's see.
You see where to advise? There you go. Yep.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. To start off, I think what I'm going to do is give you all a brief, super brief description of what Whitman, Alabama is. Then I'm going to try something which I haven't really done before, which is to take you the audience on a deep dive into how Whitman, Alabama was conceived. And this is essentially my humanities moment, Andy. So I hope that it does your question justice. And then we'll get into what I love most, which is showing the videos and conversation with you all. So what is Whitman, Alabama? I think it's many things, and I've described it in many ways, but to try to keep it simple, I'll just say that, like it says up here on the screen, Whitman, Alabama is a portrait of America. And to unpack that a little bit more, you can say it's a 52-part documentary, and each of the parts or videos correspond to one of the 52 verses from Walt Whitman's poem, Song of Myself. And that video also corresponds to a person or a couple of people reading that verse while they share something of their lives for our cameras. I like to think of each of these videos as a portrait of that person. And then as the project grows and we add a new video, there's sort of a cumulative effect. And we see not just a portrait of that particular individual, but then a portrait of a southern state, Alabama, and then ultimately a portrait of the United States. My goal with this project was to showcase people through a lens that could complicate, and I mean that in a good way, complicate how people perceive each other. I want to challenge people's perceptions of others and remind people of the complexities we all hold within ourselves. And I wanted to find a way to direct the audience gaze, your gaze, away from preconceived ideas about who people are, who a person is, and direct it towards that person's humanity and the largeness of who that person is. I'm not a particular fan of singular limiting narratives like, she's a Republican, he's from a blue state, she's Black, he's Asian, they're old, she's Muslim. I think we could go on and on and on with this sort of list. With Whitman, Alabama, what I'm trying to do is offer reminders for something as basic as how we all have a shared humanity, and offer avenues for connection, ways to celebrate our differences, and to spark curiosity, not just of people and cultures that you don't know, but a curiosity for a deeper understanding of people you think you already do know. So other than that, I can say about it, we've published 25 of the 52 Whitman, Alabama verses. We've filmed about 41, and with luck, we'll raise the funds to finish the entire project in all 52 of them. So keep your eye out at the start of next year. We're hoping to add a video or two to the project if we can do that. Okay, so I'm gonna start here. I'm going to apologize too, because there's going to be a bunch of little dots that sort of appear on the screen here. You're going to have to look hard for them because I made a little bit of a technical error, and the colors didn't show up. They're supposed to be a bright orange, but they'll turn out to be a gray and fade a little bit into the screen here. But as I talk, you'll see points on the map sort of appearing, and hopefully you can squint and see them. So I apologize for that little technical error. But okay, so moving on, how was Whitman, Alabama conceived or born? And to answer that, we're going to start, let's see if I can,
so I think
right
what you might,
here.
Let's see.
There we go.
Yep, there you,
I think I've got that. See, can you guys, there's that little gray circle there underneath the New York. Squint hard or just sort of imagine that there's a circle there, but we'll start here in New York, 1855. I don't think this crowd needs much of an introduction to Whitman, to Walt Whitman, but Huntington, New York was where he was born, and you probably already know he was raised in Brooklyn. He's a white dude, he's a Yankee. Over his lifetime, he worked as a teacher, a printer, a journalist, and a government clerk. He was a lot of things. But of course, he was arguably one of America's greatest poets. And 1855 New York, that was the year 1855 that Whitman published his first edition of his book of poetry, Leaves of Grass. Here's Whitman, right around the time he published Leaves of Grass in 1855. And within Leaves of Grass, you could find the poem that would eventually be titled Song of Myself. I think of it as an epic love letter to America and Americans. It's a celebration of ourselves and our complexity and our cosmic connection to each other. And he published it in the years leading up to the Civil War. America was fracturing, and I think that's something that we all can feel pretty viscerally for ourselves today. Song of Myself, I think, is his deeply empathetic effort towards recognizing and showing off the beauty, diversity, connections, contradictions, and mysteries in who we all are. So that, 1855, New York. And now we're going to leap forward over 100 years in time and thousands of miles in space to these two places. And if you can see them on the map, they're this little dot over here on the left in the States, and there's a dot over here on the right of the screen. You can't see my mouse, can you, Andy? I don't think you can.
I don't think.
You don't think? Okay. Well, it's Vietnam. It's over here. It's in East Asia. Just I don't know if you can see the dot, but it's just north of Australia over there. Let me see if I can do this. Actually, maybe this will help. And so 1942, Denver, Colorado was where my father was born and raised. He, like Whitman's, white dude, he was raised Protestant, and he grew up eating meatloaf and overcooked roast beef on Sundays and banana cream pie. English was his first and only language up until a certain point, and he was the first person in his family to go to college. And then over there in Saigon, Vietnam, which is now Ho Chi Minh City, my mother was born. She's not Vietnamese, though. She's Chinese, quite different from my dad. She grew up eating pho, banh mi, thut kha, mangosteen. She spoke Vietnamese, Cantonese, and Mandarin, and had, Confucian, Buddhist, and Taoist influences swirling around her as she was growing up. Clearly, my folks grew up worlds apart, but they met and connected, got married, and had my sister and I. So I would grow up embodying and being influenced by really vastly different and sometimes contradicting cultures. It was very much East meets West, I would say. And I grew up being pushed and pulled and inspired and influenced in many different directions. But things get even trickier than that because my folks gave birth to me here, and it's going to be hard to see too, but right in the middle here, up there in the Horn of Africa, is Asmara, Ethiopia. Today, Asmara is actually part of Eritrea, so that's why it's in parentheses there. So my earliest sights, smells, and tastes and influence were not only from those of my parents' worlds, but intermingled with those were sights, smells, and tastes from this area in the Horn of Africa, if you can see it. And I should say that the reason I was born here was because my father worked for the United States Agency for International Development, so we moved a lot. And after a couple years of living in Ethiopia, we moved again and again. And there's a few dots that should be coming up here on the screen. Hard to see as well, but near Islamabad, we moved to Afghanistan, which is really close to this line here in Pakistan. We moved to Bangladesh. We moved to Haiti, that's over here in the Caribbean. So Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Haiti, Pakistan, and I loved all these places. And again, I'm so sorry that you can't see them spread out up here on the map. But every few years, I was in a new location that I'd have to adapt to and learn from and understand. And by the time I was 16, I'd grown up. I just lost my screen here. I'd grown up. Are you able to see the screen, Andy? I just sort of lost
we can see it. So,
you can see it?
Yep.
Oops,
there you
hold
go.
on. Strange. I don't know why I can't.
Listen, all these teachers are teaching online. Every single one of them goes through that on a regular basis.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Can you see the screen now?
I can. I think something. It's just flicker. Hold on. I think it's my personal screen is sort of flickering in and out. I think that's what the problem is. Give me 2 seconds to just play with this cord here. I'm sorry about that, guys.
Okay, it's all good. Right now we can see slide 23.
Okay, I think it's back up here.
Great, thank you.
Nope, we want to go. Actually, I want to go back real quick.
Yep, got it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't. You guys, which slide do you guys see now?
We can see it. Yes.
I don't see a single slide. So you're seeing slide. Let me try.
So I'm going to give everybody a chance just to stretch in their seat, and I'll do a little troubleshooting with you. I'm not quite sure what may have happened, but if you go above your slide, you see where there's slides, overlay videos, etc. Make sure that you've got the slides tab selected.
Yep. And I'm on slide 22, but I don't see an image.
We can see it.
Okay, so you see a map, basically, is what you see? I think is slide 22.
Yep, we see a map.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I think I was talking about moving around to all these different places. And by the time I was 16, I had grown up in mostly Muslim countries, and I was used to the sounds of, calls to prayers coming from the mosques, monsoon rains, and my comfort food was curry, and I could cuss in Urdu. And so I was absorbing many cultures into my sense of self, and was sharpening my ability to see things through various cultural lenses. And it was becoming more clear that a single cultural perspective or a single perspective of any kind was really limiting. And that if, one just took the time and made the effort, you could see things from different points of view and find ways to connect with new people and places. And this just became instinctual for me. At the same time, though, people began to start asking me a particular question quite a lot. And that question was, what are you? All that bouncing around and being mixed race really showed. And for as wonderful as this was to have all these influences, it did become a hard question to answer. So I started beginning to ask myself that question, what am I? And we left Pakistan at around that time. I was 16 and moved back to the United States, back to Virginia. And back in the States, people continued to ask me, what are you? I was now, in my home and native land. I was American, but I felt pretty out of place. I was confused about the cultures here, and I would try to explain what I was and where I had come from. People had little understanding or connection to the places that I'd, lived in, and often they operated on stereotypes of those places, which was frustrating and confusing for me, and very limiting. And so I started to look for answers for how to better represent those places and articulate who I was and how I fit into things. And so the thing I did most was wander the aisles of bookstores, pensive and hoping something in a book maybe might offer me some answer. And here we go. This is my humanities moment. One day I saw an anthology of American poetry in a Crown bookstore in McLean, Virginia. I don't know what compelled me to pull it off the shelf. Maybe that was an anthology, so I thought there might be different perspectives in there. And I pulled it off the shelf and I bought it. And I found that very copy the other day. And I can see the slide now. So can you all see the slide, Andy? Can you see this? It's working for me again.
Yeah, we're all good. Yeah.
Great. So this is a book I bought about 30 years ago when I was 16, and I started flipping through it, searching for something without knowing what I was looking for. And at some point, I landed on this page, and these lines. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. And I'm sure by now that you all can understand why these lines just pulled me in, and they spoke to me, and they spoke to those myriads of cultures that I had been absorbing as I had moved from place to place. So I flipped to the start of the poem and saw that it was called Song of Myself. And right there, these lines: for every atom belonging to me is good as good belongs to you. And I just wondered, who is this person affirming to me that not only can we have multiple selves, and affirming to me myself, but also that fundamentally we are connected. Somehow we are connected, and connected no matter how disconnected we may feel, and no matter how much we might forget that. So I read the rest of the poem, and then I let it marinate within me for about 25 years. In the meantime, I continued to move, and we're not going to be able to see all these dots here, but suffice it to say, it was sort of all over the globe. And I moved for grad school, for work as a journalist, and saw more of the United States and how textured and diverse and fascinating this country is, like any place, really. Unfortunately, this also came with a growing reminder for how divided and far from each other Americans are. People in different parts of this country seem to feel just as far from each other and foreign to each other as I used to feel Americans felt about, say, Pakistanis or Ethiopians or Bangladeshis. Another place that I lived was Bangladesh. And then, just a few years ago, I visited Alabama, and just really fell in love with it. Like the other places that I had been, I loved the music, I loved the accents, I loved the weather, the food, the beaches, the people. It reminded me of living in all these other places I had lived in. It's an imperfect place. No place is perfect. But a place that people tend to have very one-dimensional ideas about. And I knew that, for example, Pakistan shouldn't and couldn't be reduced to stereotypes. So why was a place like Alabama, or why did people think any place or people could be reduced to a stereotype? For example, reduced to simply a color, like, say, red. So, wrapping up here, I was invited to stay in Alabama to be an artist in residence for Alabama Media Group, which is one of the largest news rooms in Alabama. And I wanted to develop a project that could remind people to not lose sight of human complexity, and to nudge people to remember the deeper threads that bind us together. So yeah, long story short, I decided to do this by revisiting that poem that where I had that humanities moment, Andy, and that I discovered so many years ago, Song of Myself. And I found a couple amazing teammates to partner with, not just Walt Whitman, partnering with Walt Whitman, bridging time and space, but Bob Miller and Pierre Catar, really wonderful people, and just good humans and photographers. And then partnering with the people of Alabama. And really, it's also, I feel like the viewers are enfolded in this experience too. So that was my idea, to just sort of like do a co-created work. And, what I came up with was Whitman, Alabama, which many of you have already hopefully seen a few of the videos. That's how it all, really began, from a humanities moment, like you said. So I'll leave it there. I hate talking a lot, and we can jump into some videos if you want to. Does that work for you?
I would. Yeah, I would love to do that. And as always, I will encourage the audience to add any questions you might have about Jen's story, about the project itself, about what we're doing, to the Ask the Filmmaker tab, or Ask Jen tab, I think it says. So put that in, and as the moderator, I'll bring into the conversation. But before you start, Jen, I've got just one question that's come in for you. Can you describe or talk a little bit about the ways that approaching a project like this, or approaching a culture, whatever that culture might be, as a filmmaker, is the same or different than doing so as a journalist?
Um, Honestly, they're so
Hmm.
intertwined for me. It might be very different for another filmmaker, for another documentarian. I think they sort of might take different approaches or different liberties. But for myself, uh, they're really intertwined for me. It's most important. I mean, I guess I could say this. It's different than a journalist in that I was really trying to push the envelope and the edges of what journalism is. Typically, with a journalistic piece, you're not seeing people read poetry. Typically, I
Right.
might go out and interview these people, and I might sort of, it might be more prescriptive. I would gather the information and I'd tell you what I've learned about them, and try to do that in an even-handed way. This, I still think of journalism, but I've just pushed the edges of it a little bit. And what I've done is, you know, try to still give you something true about the person. And that's where I think that, I'm still attached to journalism. Try to give you something real, try to give you something nonfiction, but in a sort of very indirect, non-prescriptive way, where you just walk away with it with a feeling or an idea, or the sense that maybe you want to get to know more, or you're curious. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, and I think we're going to have some more questions about your methodology and about your experience. But I would really like to just dive into some of these verses. So
Great.
you tell me when you're ready for me to play, and what I'll do is launch the video of each verse. We'll play it in its entirety, and the audience will hear it and see it, and then afterwards you can continue your commentary.
Okay, great. I'll let's see. We can start with verse 1.
Okay, and I'm double checking. Can you see the slides now?
I can see the slides now. Yeah.
So we're on 27.
We're on 27. Yeah, and we can switch. I can skip these two. I wanted to show, but we can go back to that. This is just what we got out there, and we met a bunch of people, and this is a couple of my colleagues, Bob and Jannard on the left, and us getting out and meeting folks. And I didn't mean to skip by these slides, but yeah, here's verse 1, and here's Virginia May. We can start there.
Okay, so we'll start with this one again. To the audience, I'm about to launch the video. It will pop up in your screen. If you don't see it for some reason, you might have pop-up blockers on your computer. If you do, just be patient. You can access all of these video clips in the full project, which is on the tabs at the top. But we'll also make sure that you have it. If for some reason your volume doesn't work, or you're in a place where the video doesn't stream, it seems to always be seamless. But if for some reason it's not, be patient. They're only a few minutes long, and then we'll come back. So the first one we're going to launch is verse 1. This is with Virginia May, who Camille recognized immediately.
Look right here for me, Virginia May.
Hmm?
Just like you are, looking right here at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Don't move. Stay right there. It starts like that.
Mm-hmm. And start like this?
And then starts.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Like it. Yeah, let's do it.
Is this before or after the drink of water?
No drinking.
No drinking. No drinking in this home.
I actually put some whiskey in there.
No, shoot. I thought you were going to bring me a scotch and soda. I celebrate myself and sing myself. And what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood formed from this soil, from this air. Born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old, and in perfect health, begin, hoping to cease not till death. Creeds and schools and a band, retiring back a while, sufficed as what they are, but never forgotten. I harbor for good or bad. I permit to speak at every hazard. Nature without check, with original energy.
That was excellent. Yeah. Pretty good at this.
Did we get it?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So, what to say about Virginia May? I have a couple things to say, but if you have any questions, or I could just dive right in.
Well, there are some questions I think that we can add to this. I want everybody to kind of simmer and linger with that verse as well. And there's really two things that you're hearing, right? And maybe you can speak some to this. One is, of course, you're hearing the words written in 1855 by a man who's long been dead, but you're hearing them through an older folk who, in some ways, it seems to be her words. This likely is part of the point here, right? I mean, that she is channeling this verse, and then you find out, of course, that she's passed. So how does all this collide for you? I mean, this is just lovely.
I think what I'm trying to do is make sure that I've got a lot of things that are going to collide, and it's going to collide differently and come together differently for, I think, different people. For me, this was one of the first videos that we did, and I'm sorry to say that Virginia never saw it. She passed only a few months after we filmed her. But for me, when I was sort of dreaming up this project and trying to figure out if it would work, I thought, what I want to do is, Whitman, he says in this line, and I now 37 years old in perfect health begin. And to hit home this idea that we are complex people, and that we are all linked as well, I said, why would I take a 37-year-old white guy just like Whitman to sort of mouth those words and embody those words? Let's see if we can really play with, ask Virginia May. She's 97 years old, and here she is saying, I'm now 37 years old in perfect health begin. And so this was she's a wonderful person to open up with, because it really sort of shows those contrasts, and she owns those words, and she's interpreting them in the way that she wants to, and we get to see her and her meeting this moment of saying yes to reading poetry for this project. But you get to see her own it in her own way, yet she's marrying herself to these words of Whitman, yet contrasting with them at the same time. So I'm just throwing a lot of things at people at once, yet hoping that they land and make sense at the same time, and just give people a sense of a person, more so than telling you who they are. There's a lot jam-packed in what I just said, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah. And each of the vignettes have some context and some background information about not only the people featured in each episode, but also some other context that you've provided to the audience. At the end of this particular verse, you note that you were introduced to Virginia May at church.
Yeah.
One of the questions that's come in so far is, how do you find people to do this? Do people recommend someone to you, or do you intentionally try to match verses with who you said? The question's not even fair, because you've already really been clear about breaking these stereotypes, but do you try to
Right.
match verse person, or do you just kind of
Right.
let it flow?
Really good question. So I do it basically about 3 different ways that I try to match people. When I first went to Alabama, I was just like, introduce me to people you know. Like I love talking to people, so I'd meet people at the grocery store. Like I've met Virginia May at church. I was invited to go to church with a couple and saw her in a play there. And so when I first, any and every way that one can meet people, by introduction, because you go out of your way to do it, because you accidentally meet them, that's how we do it. So, for Virginia May, that was just, I was introduced to her at church. Other people, I think there's sort of 2 parts of your question, like how do I meet people, but how do I sort of pair them with the verses as well? And, some people, we just got on the road and just when we just saw something interesting happening, or we'll see another verse in a few minutes that sort of exemplifies this. Met people just by stopping people on the side of the road. So any way you can meet a person, through introduction, through just tapping people on the shoulder, meeting them, or maybe someone might come up to me because I had a camera and they're curious. It doesn't mean I filmed everyone, but just being really, really open to the ways in which you can meet people and then be a part of their lives. Just being super open to that. And then maybe I can save how I paired people till we've watched a few more later.
We could do,
yeah.
And as someone who grew up in a very small southern town, let me tell you, that whole state knew you were in the building. They knew what you were up to. You didn't have to introduce yourself.
Yeah, there you go.
One other quick question before we move on. Did you work with each person, or in this case, Virginia May, did you work with them on how to recite the poem, or is it more one take kind of action? Trudy Harris also asks if Virginia herself has any kind of performance background, because there was such a striking kind of performative sense of her voice posture.
Yes.
Was that her background?
Yeah. So when I was invited to church, it was to go see a church play, and Virginia May just stormed onto the stage and was like, who is this woman? She just completely grabbed everyone's attention. And it turns out that, in Birmingham, quite a few people recognize Virginia May. So she, unlike the majority of people in this, she has a background in performance, but that's not why I was drawn to her for that, but I don't want these to be performative pieces. I want people to just read them as themselves. And so I didn't say Virginia May play the role of a female Walt Whitman when you're reading this. I just said, hey, would you read this? And it was up to her to how she read it and how comfortable she was with the, I gave her the material ahead of time. To be honest, not everyone got the material ahead of time, because some people, they did it right on the spot when I met them. So some people just sort of had to work with it right away. So it just sort of depended on the person. Some people had, the material to work with before, some people didn't. And we just went with that rather than trying to make it an equivalent experience every single time.
Fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. You have a few more slides and then we'll introduce the next.
Yeah. They're just some placeholders, visual placeholders, but here's another one. So this is verse 37 by John Graham and Chris Freeman, and I won't say much more about that. We can talk about it after it sort of unfolds.
Okay, I'm going to play this now. It will pop up just as the last one did, and to our audience and friends, if the volume is low, you can adjust that on your side. So just crank up your volume and it should come through loud and clear. Here we go with verse 37.
First day I was here, one of my friends who was a state legislator came to see me, and he said, John, I want to tell you something. An old politician in Montgomery told me the first day I was in office in the legislature, and don't you ever forget it. You have an important job, a very important job, but you are not an important person. Don't ever forget that.
All right.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jackson County Circuit Court. Welcome to Drug Court. I'm John Graham. It's my privilege to serve you as one of your circuit judges. Let's see who is here.
I'm Keisha Helton. I pled into drug court January the 17th, 2015. My clean date is 6/6/15.
Anything special going on? Anything out of the ordinary? Anything unusual? Anything I need to know about? Anything you don't want me to know about?
Same old stuff, just meetings, class, raising kids, now getting my kid ready for first grade. It's a handful.
Laggards there on guard, look to your arms. In at the conquered doors they crowd. I am possessed, embody all presences, outlawed or suffering. See myself in prison, shaped like another man, and feel the dull, unintermitted pain. All right, well, thank you, Miss Helton.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck to you this week. Chris Freeman.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Freeman.
What's going on?
Doing what I'm supposed to do, Your Honor. Staying clean and sober.
Good.
For me, the keepers of convicts shoulder their carbines and keep watch.
It is I let out in the morning and barred at night. Not a mutineer walks handcuffed to jail, but I am handcuffed to him and walk by his side.
I am less the jolly one there, and more the silent one, with sweat on my twitching lips.
You have a driver's license?
I do.
Is that important?
Yes.
You got reliable transportation?
Most days.
Good, clean place to live?
I do.
Drug-free, crime-free?
Yep.
Good. Let's keep it that way. All right, who's next back there? Y'all been good? Helping mama? What are y'all doing for fun this summer?
Swimming, we go to church, meetings
Good. Call your sponsor.
daily. Talk to her for 3 hours some days.
My name is Charles Palmer. My pleading date's February 23rd, 2015, and my clean date is January 27th, 2015.
Doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Going to meetings, working. Went to visit my sponsor yesterday.
Every now and then, me and my guys from my home group go to Bradford, the treatment center I went to, and it's like the little panel speak.
My name is Joshua Akins. My pleading date is June the 20th. My clean date is March the 20th. Took me a little while to get my head back in it, but I'm back on the right track now.
Not a youngster is taken for larceny, but I go up too, and am tried and sentenced.
Not a cholera patient lies at the last gasp.
But I also lie at the last gasp.
My face is ash-colored. My sinews gnarl.
Away from me, people retreat. Okay, thank y'all. I'm glad to see all of you. We'll be adjourned until next time.
Askers embody themselves in me, and I am embodied in them.
I project my hat, sit shamefaced, and beg.
Jen, I think I know why these make me cry.
Well, you tell me.
I'll tell you why. Because I've taught all those people, or I've grown up with them, right? And it doesn't mean them literally, but it's such a common denominator in humanity, right? Loss and struggle and recovery.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think you are going to react to this differently than I do. I think that all of these pieces are emotional to me because these people were so generous. It sounds like you have more of a specific understanding of who these folks, these particular folks are, because you might have had because of where you particularly grew up. For me, I love this piece, and well, again, I love all of them, but for what these folks have done. But this was because drug addiction and the opioid crisis, especially in Appalachia, that's a story, and you'd think it's a story that interests me. But at the same time, I found that, like many stories that interest me in the news, I tend to sort of gloss over them or not really pay much attention. And for this, again, it's sort of trying to show who people are beyond the thing we're supposed to pay attention to them for. So typically stories are, like here's an addict, or here's someone who's struggling with addiction. And this is just, I just want to show who folks are and give a sense of, not tell you, but show you something. And it's hard to put words as to what those things are, but so that maybe I'm not telling you all the facts and figures and giving you all the data on drug addiction, but maybe if you watch a piece like this, you'll carry something with you, so that when you do meet someone who's struggling, or you do meet someone from that region of the country, or you do meet a judge, or you do have, issues of addiction yourself, or you do come across the next article, you might carry something differently with you and imbibe that information differently, and just sort of be slightly altered for it. So yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Well, one of the things that I think happened with that piece.
I don't want this question to come off the wrong way, so I'm gonna overtalk it and ask. So my question is, how many people, let's say in the episode that we just watched, because there were quite a few people, how many people did you introduce Walt Whitman to through this project? And I don't mean it to suggest that, of course, they don't know Walt Whitman because they're in drug court. I just mean, did you get a sense that you were also introducing this poem, the one that you brought forward from your childhood, to this sort of strangers who are not strangers anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can answer not specifically for this verse, but for the project as a whole. A lot of people ask me how many people in Alabama were familiar with this poem, and truthfully, I think, obviously anecdotally, I get the sense that as many people that I've met anywhere from California to New York, when I talk about this project, or when I've talked about Whitman before, we have bridges named after him, we have schools we have named after him, we have like rest stops named after him, we have malls named after him. Like, in theory, basically everyone says, I think I might have read him in high school, if they went to high school or college. Right. But no one really, he's America's poet. He did this beautiful, empathetic work to America. It's like a gift to all of us to sort of put ourselves in and use as a guidepost. It's a beautiful, spiritual, secular text. That's how I think of Song of Myself. But yet, I felt like people weren't very familiar with it. And I don't think it was an Alabama thing or a drug court thing, because people would pop up all the time and be very familiar with it. It was just never who you expected or when you expected. So I don't really know how to answer that question other than say, I feel like for as well known and as deeply we're supposed to be aware and educated about Whitman and his poetry, I feel like somehow we've completely missed the mark. So yeah, there are people in unexpected places that love his poetry. I was in an oddities shop in Birmingham and talking about this project with someone, and someone tapped my shoulder and said, "Oh my God, I love Whitman." And random people on the road I knew that I met, I knew that they hadn't met him before, because they told me right after they read, "Oh, I think I'll read some Whitman now," even though they just did for me. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, it's a great answer, actually. And without trying to set that up, I think one of the things that resonated with me about what you just answered was, again, we're sort of exploding any mythology or misconceptions about people and who they are and where they come from and what their story really is. And, the truth is, and I know all the teachers in the room tonight acknowledge this on some level, but, the things that we teach in our curriculum or the things that we hold dear in, Unit 8 of, mid-19th century literature in the courses we teach, many years later, a lot of people don't necessarily remember them. So it's not. So I definitely didn't mean to offer a judgment that they may or may not have known Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, as much as to say, you just introduced them to all of that, and that's really pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and I think some people, like I said, some people told me it's really changed them. Some people said, "Wow, I think I might read that," and some people might never look at it again. I don't know. The goal for this is not. This is certainly part of this is to celebrate Walt Whitman and sort of remind people of his efforts. But this isn't a Whitman project. This isn't meant to sort of be like educating people about Whitman per se, so much as educating people about people. And right. Using Whitman, because I think he says somewhere at the end of the poem, "I stopped somewhere waiting for you." He wants us, he's asking us, calling us from the past and sort of saying, help me in this endeavor. And so, yeah, I sorry, I didn't mean to say that you were judging so much as saying, I think that
oh, no.
He's just, people deeply reacted to this after they read it. And I'm sure that I haven't taken a full poll, but I'm sure there are people that were like, great. And they moved on to the next thing after reading it,
Well, maybe so, but I think part of what I would offer too, to underscore what you're saying is that poetry is in fact a really specific tool that can do all of those things that you just suggested. And that's why we've had poetry for thousands and thousands of years, right? It's like there is something, there's some kind of alchemy with poetry. So for all of the teachers of poetry in the room tonight, there is a reason that they're doing that. But it's just really interesting to me that you personally brought this back. And as many of the comments in the chat box said, you could feel the intimacy and the vulnerability of what folks were sharing through those words. Thank you. So, you've got a few more slides, and then we'll play a third verse.
Yeah, they're just visual placeholders to more people, not placeholders, but while we were talking, I meant to be flipping through these so that we could, just meet a few more people that read for us. But verse 43, it's a bit longer. It's about 12 minutes, just so you guys know what to expect. 12 or 13 minutes, I think. So I think we can just jump right into that one.
Great. That's what we'll do. And again, for everybody, this is likely the third and the last vignette that we'll play tonight, but you can find all 25 published vignettes on the website, Whitman, Alabama. It's in the tabs above the slideshow, and also the entire digital project is tagged in the digital library. But sit back, turn up your volume, and we're going to introduce you now to verse 43.
Can I tell you a little bit more about our project?
I don't care.
So I'm going all around the state with Pierre and some other folks, and we're doing a documentary on Alabamians where I just want to highlight the lives of different people we meet, because I think Alabama's a pretty fascinating, interesting state. Instead of interviewing people, I'm asking them to read parts of the poem on camera. Would you guys be interested in being on camera at all?
Not really.
Not really?
Not really.
Not your thing?
No.
Not really.
I sit back in the back. I let everybody be up front. I just sit back and listen.
Yeah, that's what I do too, actually.
That's all I do. I don't like to be up front and nobody notice me.
No. Yeah. Well, you're on it a little bit, but you don't want to be on it anymore reading some poetry?
Oh.
No? But this is okay right now?
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah.
It's just the poetry that's a bit too much.
Well, let me look at it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll let you do all this. I'm going in the house.
I do not despise you priests all time, the world over. My faith is the greatest of faith and the least of faith. Enclosing worship, ancient and modern, and all between ancient and modern. believing I shall come again upon the earth after 5,000 years, waiting response from Oracle, honoring the gods, saluting the sun.
I stopped because I was hoping y'all were from the Audubon Society, who I haven't called, but somebody will, because there is a white hawk that lives in this 3-mile stretch. God didn't make any white hawks, except for this one.
Well, I'm sorry we're not from the Audubon Society.
Right, it's okay.
We were just
It's
having
all right.
lunch on the side of the road.
It's all right. You probably didn't scare him off. He's probably fine. Don't worry.
In lieu of that, you gonna read some poetry for us?
Sure.
Okay.
In closing worship, ancient and modern, and all between, ancient and modern, believing I shall come again upon the earth after 5,000 years, waiting responses from oracles, honoring the gods, saluting the sun, making a fetish of the first rock or stump, powwowing with sticks in the circle of obus, helping the lama or Brahmin as he trims the lamps of the idols, dancing yet through the streets in a phallic procession, wrapped and austere in the woods of Gymnosophist, drinking mead from the skull cup to Shastas and Vedas admirant, minding the Quran. Kind of makes me want to read Walt Whitman. Thanks.
Well, you know, I'm just kind of used to it, and I'm just like, you know. This is my boss. This is Chase Taylor. Okay. Yeah, he owns it.
Chase? Hey, this is Jennifer Crandall. Hey, sorry, you're wondering what we're doing here? Well,
We'll watch out for him.
my partner and I we're working on a documentary here in Alabama, and we're going around to all different parts of Alabama, and we were like, oh, there's a drive-in theater. This is cool. So we were checking it out, and we're basically trying to highlight the lives of Alabamians all across the state and show how just rich and diverse the state is. Now we just have to convince these women to do it.
Drinking mead from the skull cup to Shastas and Vedas admirant, minding the Quran, walking the Teocallis, spotted with gore from the stone and knife, beating the serpent skin drum. Accepting the Gospels, accepting him that was crucified, knowing assuredly that he is divine. To the Mass kneeling, or the Puritan's prayer rising.
Or sitting patiently in a pew, ranting and frothing in my insane crisis, or waiting dead-like till my spirit arouses me. Looking forth on pavement and land, or outside of pavement and land. Belonging to the winders of the circuit of circuits.
Belonging to the winders of the circuit of circuits, one of that centrifugal and centrifugal game, I turn and talk like a man, leaving charges before he journey. Downhearted doubters, dull and excluded, frivolous, sullen, moping, angry and affected. Distant-hearted, atheistical, I know every one of you. I know the sea of torment, doubt, despair, and unbelief.
how the fruits splash,
How they contort rapid as lightning.
how they contort rapid as lightning,
With spasms and spouts of blood.
with spasms and spouts of blood.
Be at peace, bloody flutes.
Be it pieces of blood of fruits.
And you said you have trouble reading. Why is that?
Been so long ago.
Yeah, were you not really taught very well how to read, or?
No.
Be at peace, bloody flutes.
With peace, bloody fruits.
Of doubters and sullen mopers.
How doubted and flooded opens.
I take my place among you.
I take my place among you.
As much as among any.
As amongst any.
As much as among any.
As amongst and amongst any.
The past is the push of you.
The past is the push of you.
Me.
All.
Precisely the same.
Precisely the same.
And what is yet untried.
What is yet untried.
And afterward.
And afterward.
Is for you.
Is for you.
Me.
Me.
All precisely the same.
All precisely the same.
Yeah, I'm a good reader. I'm not a good reader, but I'm a good singer.
Prove it. Prove it.
Prove it. Okay. I'm salvation free. I'm salvation. And let your joy be known. Shone down for you and me. I'm glad salvation free.
Here's pink bubble gum. Here's some tiger's blood. Thank you. I do not know what is untried and afterward, but I know it will prove sufficient and cannot fail. Each who passes is considered, each who stops is considered. Not a single one can it fail. It cannot fail the young man who has died and buried, nor the young woman who has died and put by his side, nor the little child that peeked into the door.
Thank you, y'all have a good day.
And then drew back and was never seen again. Nor the old man who has lived without purpose and fills it with bitterness, worse than gold. Nor him in the poor house tubercled by rum and the bad disorder, nor the numberless slaughtered and wrecked, nor the brutish kabod called the order of humanity. Nor the sacks merely floating with open mouths for food to slip in, nor anything in the earth or down in the oldest graves of the earth, nor anything in the myriads of spears, nor the myriads of myriads that inhabit them, nor the present, nor the least wisp that is known.
Oh, are you okay? Oh, right. We're done.
Jen, that was your greatest hits. That had the all-star team.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful.
Thank you. There was, it's all due to these folks that we randomly sort of met, and in there was someone who sort of answered a little bit to your question before of do people, read Walt Whitman afterwards? Cindy, after the woman who was trying to find the White Hawk, said she thought she might read some Whitman after this. So maybe.
Maybe so. That's right. I'm going to take a question that came in after the second vignette and sort of splice it a little bit into this one, but you're welcome to respond to any of the verses. Savannah, who is on faculty at Appalachia State University, western part of of North Carolina. Savannah asks whether she was specifically asking about drug court and the ways that it was such a sort of a beautiful and articulate setting and scene. Was that intentional on your part? And I guess that question applies for this most recent verse 43 as well. As a filmmaker, how much did you just let people be themselves, and how much did you attempt to position a story?
The most important thing for me was that people be themselves. I emphasize that and stress that more than anything else. Like, please don't read this in any way you feel like it needs to be read. It just needs to be read. It just needs to come from you. That being said, I'm not going to pretend, like as a filmmaker, we have lots of control. I'm making editing choices. I'm choosing who we're going to read. So, but that was, my attempt to counteract that was just be very much like, please just do this as yourself. And we operated very much on a principle oftentimes of serendipity, sort of 49% control, 51% serendipity. Let sort of the subject, the person reciting, guide whether they realize they were doing it or not. Like I would try to take subtle cues that they might be having about discomfort or and work with that. And again, if they didn't feel comfortable doing something, we didn't do it. As far as the courtroom, I had met John. I'd witnessed him in his courtroom before, and it looked exactly like this. Nothing to my recollection was changed, though I do know that everyone before drug court that day was informed that they would be filmed. So if they were acting different or dressed different, that was up to them. It's nothing that I noticed, but in advance of folks coming through the door, they did know that there were going to be cameras there. So so I really try to make as much room as possible, despite the fact that I am, the filmmaker. We make editing choices. I try to do them as loyally to the person as I think I can. But it's very much how much of that person and how they were trying to meet this moment of reading poetry for essentially some strangers. How much of the truth of that moment could I bring forth, whether they felt uncomfortable or they were having trouble reading or they felt confident. Each person sort of handled it differently. And I just tried to make as much room for that as possible.
Absolutely. I'm going to advance the slide, if you don't mind, one more to show this image and then ask this question, which is, you've shared 3 with us and annotated them and described your experience in filming them and producing them. There's 22 others that I would love for our audience to go and spend time with. Can you tell us a little bit, just off the cuff, about the diversity of people that you were able to meet on the road in Alabama? Tell us more about some of the folks that they might meet should they dip into the other 22 episodes?
Yeah, let me. I mean, here's the thing. Like, the word diversity is a real difficult one for me, because I think that tends to, and I'm not saying that this is what you're saying here, but for myself, to make clear, it tends to be for people, usually fall on racial diversity, age diversity, ability, sexual orientation, but generally oftentimes in terms of race or ethnicity. And the way I approach diversity, because I do believe Alabama is a very diverse state, and that's very much what this project is about, is sort of embracing diversity, is that we have a lot of diversity within us. Like Whitman said, which is what I loved, he said, "Do I contradict myself? I contain multitudes." We have multiple selves within each of us. Like, Andy, the only thing that you do is not this job. You don't only run webinars. You're not only a white male. You talked about a little bit about your upbringing, but there's like your hobbies, your fears, your emotions. Like, there's like infinite sides of who you are and that's what I find interesting, is the diversity found within someone else, and what I want to play with and what I want to highlight. So for each of these, I hope that, just by virtue of the fact that these folks are saying yes to reading poetry, you're not looking at them one-dimensionally. And so I certainly did think of, how can we hit the different geographical areas of Alabama and be diverse that way, the different sort of let's think about different age groups and different abilities and different ethnicities. But I didn't rest there. I didn't want to only be thinking about those things for these people. Like this family in front of us, I didn't, approach them as, here's a group of women, or here's a group of Black people. Like, it was a family that was clearly having some sort of interaction on the beach that day, and their father had passed, and it turns out they have a really, really rich and interesting story. We haven't edited this video yet, but so anyway, diversity for me is, yes, there's certainly sort of those baseline things that I think about, and we hope that we're really mixing it up in terms of socioeconomics. One thing I can say that I didn't do was I didn't specifically ever overtly ask anyone their political affiliations. I didn't specifically ask anyone anything. I didn't ask them their sexual orientation, or their race, or their political affiliations. I didn't really do that. I mean, certain things were obvious, like the judge is the judge and someone is in drug court. Or Virginia May, I knew she was an actress, but I just tried to let those things sort of like percolate forward, and some things are obvious and some things are not obvious. I mean, I think from this group of women here, you'd be surprised at actually how different they all are, not just in terms of personality, but actually ethnically and racially. They're a really, even though they're related, they're a very mixed group of women. And so I don't know, that's how I tried to deal with diversity, is know that each and every person, each and every one of us has multiple selves, and they interact. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes things come forward, sometimes they don't. But if I give someone enough time and space and a sense that they can come forward, that what will they bring forward for us to see, and how they and just hope that's that makes people interested and curious about folks, if you can just sort of get past those first layers. So yeah, is that a little?
It really does, and sometimes I've found it helpful to, particularly in teaching, to focus on the word variety rather than diversity, for exactly the reasons you mentioned. And the word diversity often implies, or actually explicitly states, that there is a single mental model that everything else is not, and that one thing is what we're setting everything else against, versus variety of age, background, English as a first language, reading ability, whatever that variety metric might be. So, but I do think one of the powerful parts about the overall collection is that there is such a remarkable variety of voices in Alabama. For those of us who don't live in Alabama, we often see it in a singular way, and that's really the power of the project. We just have a few minutes left, Jen. I want to actually turn my question to. I'm going to co-op a little bit of a question that Raina asked in terms of what teachers might do with this project. I've got some ideas and suggestions, and I can share ways that I've used this pedagogically. But from your point of view, you're not an educator. You're a filmmaker and a writer. But how would you like to see this used in a classroom? Or maybe better yet, how have you heard of educators using this project?
Yeah, I actually get a lot of emails and have a lot of conversations with educators. And it seems like, they're so far, a lot has been trying to emulate this project in some way, getting their students to either read on camera or getting their students to go out and meet people and get them to read on camera. I don't think anyone needs to be following this exactly. For me, what's baked in here is the idea that can we be curious about people? Can you just open up to people? Can you find ways to get people to open up to you? And so the fact that educators are using this to sort of get their students to maybe they don't even use Whitman. They'll get them to just sort of film other people reading other poems. But I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot from folks that they're doing that. And then I think there are some other people that I've spoken to that are teaching university level courses, and they're just teaching Whitman now. They weren't teaching Whitman before because this was a new access point for them. I think this project, there's a lot baked into it, so it doesn't have to be, again, it's not a poetry project, so it doesn't have to be about the poetry. There's a lot in here that's about, you could have conversations about democracy, about the lenses we use to understand people, about, Alabama specifically, and about poetry. And in my case, this was also an effort to sort of like question what journalism could be. So there's lots of ways of getting at it. And it just sort of depends on what kind of teacher you are and what you're up to. If you're a literature professor or a poetry professor or teacher and want to get folks maybe more brave about reading, you can see that these folks are doing it. They're doing an amazing job. If you want to talk, if you want to talk about democracy, again, there's a lot of stuff in here. Don't be blinded to the fact that I think a lot of people walk away thinking about it's a poetry project, and I don't think that's what it is. There's just a lot going on in there, and you can use it in whatever creative way you can think of. But again, for me, there's at baseline, what it has to offer are tools for talking about individuality, connection, curiosity, and connection and what it means to be American. I mean, there's just so much more, but that was a bit broad, but I hope that gives some ideas.
No, and ultimately, I think that's what educators at all levels do anyway, is they find inspiration and aspiration and then find ways to modify it for their own audience. And in many cases, student to student, right? So, I think it's important for you to note, and I'm saying this, Clara, in part to answer your question, that this isn't really a poetry project, although I could absolutely imagine teachers using this to breathe life into 19th century literature that may seem a little dead and stilted to the modern contemporary ear. I could also imagine teachers using this to, as many of the suggestions in the audience chat have stated, finding students or families or communities to mirror this approach and find some text that they can share and recite and read. But it also can be, just as you're suggesting, a way to be much more reflective and imagine all the different ways that an individual can approach text or poetry or something else in the ways that you have. Because not lost on me is the way you started tonight's session, which was to tell us your own story. And the sort of the genesis of this comes from things that happened to you many, many years ago.
Yeah, a real quick exercise that just popped into my head. I don't know if it would be fruitful or not, but so many versions that I've heard, audiobooks of Song on Myself, have always been one sort of voice actor reading the whole thing. So for those out there that are listening, that are participating tonight, that are that might be teaching literature or poetry, maybe it's an exercise to sort of be like, why did people do that? I mean, here's Whitman talking about diversity and joining being there a great chorus of voices, joining his voice in getting this work out there. Why were so many renditions of Song on Myself, when recorded, always, I would guess, a white guy, but one person sort of reading it versus what we're trying to do here. And so with whatever work you've got, with whatever projects or whatever material you typically work with, like what did it take to get from one guy for over 100 and some years typically reading this poem, to a project where it was kind of like, let's make it visual, let's make it a lot of different voices. And so what kinds of works or projects or content do you typically sort of return to, and what's a different way you could be looking at it and seeing it so that it's actually it can be a different thing and you could be teaching it differently? That was sort of awkward, but I think you all can sort of piece together what I meant there.
I think you do. Jen, as I said at the beginning, I placed tonight's session tonight for a reason, and I think this is exactly what you've accomplished by sharing your project with us, Whitman, Alabama. That is to show the things we have in common, the humanity we have in common. I advanced the slides for you because we do need to wrap up, but I'm going to read into this and assume that you would love to hear from many of the audience members tonight about ways that they use it in the classroom.
Yeah, reach out anytime. I love it when people tell us how they're doing that or ask questions about that. And you can go to the website, and I think that there's some links on the contact page for figuring out how to reach out, so you can reach out to me directly. And also sign up for the newsletter so we can keep you posted of how this project is progressing, and hopefully we'll get more videos out there and this project, completed.
Jen, I want to thank you again for joining us tonight and leading tonight's session. We look forward to the next, almost 20 episodes when you complete the set. And I want to thank you again for spending the evening with us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. I really appreciate it too.